So it was an embarrassing qualifying except for Ferrari, and it's not me saying it. Leclerc said it on the team radio after the qualifying. A Ferrari really off the pace compared to everyone else, and that's not good, especially in wet conditions. There are statements from Leclerc that gave me chills. I'll let you hear them later. But first, we need to see what happened to Hamilton, because he was excluded in Q1. I recall Hamilton finished 20th, the first time in his career that he was excluded in Q1 in last position, excluding technical failures. This is an alarming situation to say the least. Let's go and see everything in detail. Of course, first I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. Please, it's essential to support me in the work I do. Having said that, let's quickly look at the standings for a brief recap, and then we'll go over the most important topics. So it was a very difficult qualifying in Las Vegas, because initially there were full wet conditions, which were foreseen by everyone, especially Aston Martin, who were the first to use full wet tires. Then the track dried up, and towards the end we saw Piotr also using intermediate tires. This ranking with Norris on pole, who did a great lap at the end. But he was also surprised by the pole because he made some mistakes in the last sector. Despite this, we also consider the superiority of McLaren, even more so in wet conditions. Well, despite these errors, he managed to secure pole position. Then there's Verstappen, who, in my opinion, had an incredible qualifying session, really making a clear difference. Look where his teammate Tsunoda is 19th, and he finished 2nd. So congratulations to Max, who keeps the championship alive as much as he can. And the MVP of this qualifying session is definitely Carlos Sainz, finishing 3rd. He drove incredibly well, especially considering that Albon was knocked out in Q1, ending up 16th, while Sainz managed to take 3rd place with a Williams. So that's quite something. Carlos always manages to do his best in these conditions. He adapts very well, so kudos. Then we see a Mercedes, Russell in 4th, 5th Piastri, who disappointed me a bit. Because considering his teammate, he could certainly have done better, still blaming external conditions and not himself. He had to make adjustments on the steering wheel. In short, he blamed something else and not his skills and ability to adapt to the track. And then, well, everyone else, Leclerc is only 9th. Let me point out that Leclerc is 9th, behind a McLaren, a Red Bull, a Williams, a Mercedes, a Racing Bulls, and an Aston Martin. 2 Racing Bulls, because both Lawson and Hadjar are ahead. And at times it was close to the Alpine also getting ahead. You can clearly see that the situation is alarming, to say the least. In wet conditions, Ferrari struggles enormously. Leclerc was already lucky to make it to Q3. He's done quite a lot. He was very fast in the first sector, but in the second and third sector he was invisible. He couldn't go fast. He struggled immensely, especially in the central chicane where the Ferrari was unmanageable. Right after, I'll let you hear an onboard of Leclerc where he slides everywhere. He finds absolutely zero grip, zero traction, and he also said it himself on the team radio that we'll listen to later. But first, before we listen to everything, I want to clarify the situation with Hamilton. Hamilton 20th, as we said before, was excluded in Q1. We saw this situation here where Hamilton reached the straight to complete and start, let's say the final flying lap, but he encountered the red lights. He also explained later in post-qualifying interviews that he caught a yellow flag in turn 17, so at the last corner, and he had lifted his foot, slowed down, as one should with a yellow flag, and then crossed the finish line where he could still start the last attempt. But then he caught the red lights, which were to inform the other drivers that the session was over. That time was up. In essence, Hamilton was very unlucky because Ricardo Da told him to push. He encountered the red lights. In my opinion, the situation should be clarified further in this case, meaning you can't put up red lights if the driver still has time available to do a flying lap. So we need to clarify when is the moment to launch, meaning when is the definitive line, the finish line that determines who can launch or not. In this case, there is a distinct difference between the lights and the finish line, so you don't understand if you can actually launch for the lap or not. Despite this, the situation could have changed, though in my opinion it was unlikely, in the sense that, yes, the track was evolving. It was improving as the drivers continued to lap. That last attempt could have been a chance for Hamilton to qualify, but it's also worth noting that he had caught the yellow flag earlier and had already lifted his foot. It could have made a difference. Yes, it was really unfortunate, a bit like Lewis's entire season. It's truly unique misfortune. And then he says, I caught the yellow flag at turn 17. I reached the finish line and there were red lights, so it was over. Actually, from the graphics, it seemed he could do another flying lap. Riccardo Adami had told him about it. Anyway, it's a very unfortunate and tight situation. I don't want to blame Hamilton or the team in that case. Really a lot of bad luck. Let's also hear the statements he made afterwards. In fact, I'll show them to you. Obviously, it couldn't get worse than this, and I agree with Hamilton. This after finishing 20th in qualifying in Las Vegas. Why did we see such a big difference between Hamilton and Leclerc? Surely also because of the setup. Let's see if I can already show you the graphics. Let's go and see that I've prepared them. Here they are. This is Leclerc and Hamilton. The difference between the lap with full wet. This is Hamilton's at 1.57.1 and Leclerc's lap at 1.54.8. You understand well, a difference of over 2 seconds between the two Ferrari drivers with the same car is a lot. But if we also look at the top speeds and everything, we see that Hamilton had a significantly higher top speed than Leclerc, also indicating a slightly lighter setup for Hamilton compared to Leclerc. We said it yesterday too, if you remember. Hamilton was comfortable with the setup. It was a bit lighter compared to Leclerc, and he intended to keep that setup for the weekend because he was doing well with it. Well, this choice didn't pay off because then it rained in Las Vegas, and so you need more downforce. And when you have less angle on the front wing and also on the rear wing, you can't stop the car as well in corners. In fact, if you see, Hamilton was struggling a lot on entry and couldn't recover afterward. If he braked harder, he would still sacrifice the exit. In short, he lost a lot in the driving part. Hamilton, you see here how much his car was sliding, a difference of 20 kilometers per hour compared to his teammate, really a lot. And you see that this difference between Hamilton and Leclerc accumulates entirely in the second sector. This is to show you the telemetry as well. And let's hear Hamilton's words anyway, because they're interesting. What he said after qualifying, we'll listen to it together and then comment on it. This is what we said before, it can't get worse than this, and he himself also said that in FP3 he felt good, and indeed he went strong in FP3, but then the conditions worsened significantly with a lot of rain during qualifying, and this also worsened his situation. His setup wasn't suitable for those conditions, and then he added the phrase, it couldn't get worse than this, but unfortunately, it did get worse. I feel sorry for Hamilton being in this situation because it's not his fault. He's really caught in a tsunami of pressure, a lot. He has motivation, he wants to do well, but the car doesn't allow him to go faster. The car is unpredictable, and this connects me to Leclerc. Let's talk about Leclerc now because the situation is alarming, and I want to start with the team radio, what Leclerc said after qualifying. Listen closely to this because it's really absurd, and afterwards, there are even worse statements.
My God, embarrassing. Fucking embarrassing. Fuck now. I don't get how it can be so off the pace. There's like zero grip. Zero fucking grip.
Here, these are Leclerc's statements where he says it's embarrassing. I mean, the situation Ferrari is experiencing right now is embarrassing. It's impossible. I don't understand how we can be so off pace compared to our opponents. It's evident because finishing behind so many, with so many teams, we did a recap earlier, it's really embarrassing. And indeed, it's true. Ferrari lost a lot, particularly with Leclerc. In the first sector, he tried to manage the gap to Norris a bit, but in the other sectors, there was devastating struggle, and the Ferrari kept sliding. In fact, I show you well, of course, all the memes about John Elkann saying, think about driving circulated and the car is undrivable. I'll show you some scenes just to help you understand how undrivable the Ferrari was on board. Let's move on. Look here, all the correction. Let's move on. Let's go to the central part that is easy to understand. Truly unmanageable, you can really feel that it has no traction, even here on entry. He has to slow down a lot to manage the car in this central chicane. Let's see here at the exit. I mean, look at these counter steers. It's an unmanageable car. I mean, listen to the engine too. I'll replay this part because it really is something beyond comment. I mean, you can hear how much the power is cut because there's no traction, no grip. And so to keep the car on the road, it cuts the power to try to manage the delivery. I mean, it's something very disappointing, especially from a team like Ferrari, where you expect them to at least be fighting at the front with the others. Not that they have to win every race, not always, but at least fight for the top 3 is the minimum. Instead, the car was unmanageable, and we saw many mistakes in this braking, which is practically the last real braking. Here, the Ferrari wouldn't stop. I mean, we saw a lot of overruns, a lot of lockups in this corner because the Ferrari wouldn't stop here. It's really difficult. I'll let you hear this on board too, still from Leclerc, and then we'll hear his statements, which are quite impressive. Here it is. This really was still with the full wets here, so still. In Q1, just listen to how much Leclerc drift. Let's move forward. I mean, you understand the situation well. I mean, you understand well how the drivers were driving in these conditions and how much both Leclerc and Hamilton are heroes to drive in these conditions. So before making certain statements like John Elkins, you need to think for a moment, take a step back, and one can speak once they have achieved some results, in my opinion. Until that moment, you need to keep your head down, work and focus on improving the car, but you can't blame the drivers because they were performing miracles, in my opinion. I mean, Leclerc's patience, which no one else has ever had at Ferrari since 2019, is really something absurd. Hamilton, after a season like this, is a saint for not exploding in the post-race statements, in my opinion. So really, the drivers are untouchable right now. Also, because you give a 7-time world champion a car like this, meaning you give him basically a carriage in the sense of a driver who is used to driving much more high-performance cars, and instead you give him an unmanageable car. I really feel sorry for Hamilton because for years he was used to driving cars that had absurd aerodynamic load, the V10, the V11, incredible Mercedes cars. And this year he found himself driving a truly unmanageable car. So much understeer. He also said in the post-race statements, difficult to drive. That said, I want to let you hear the most alarming statements of all. In fact, these are statements that mark a turning point. I'm telling you now, and from this moment on, we'll see another Leclerc, in my opinion, because these statements do not comment on the qualifying, particularly of Las Vegas, but comment on Ferrari's situation in the wet, and they are concerning for those who love seeing Leclerc in Ferrari. This is a bit the turning point that I saw in the past with Vettel. I saw in the past with Alonso, who went from loving Ferrari to finding themselves in a, let's say, a marriage that doesn't work, if you will, starting to find problems and no longer finding that serenity that then allows them to move forward. I'll let you hear these statements, then we'll comment on them together.
Since I joined the team, we've been struggling massively at finding the grip in those kind of conditions. It's hugely frustrating because it's probably been my biggest strength in the junior categories, and then we are doing something wrong. I have no idea what that is because we've turned the car upside down. We've had Lewis and obviously Carlos before that also joined from other teams that could tell us the feelings they had with the other cars, but it's just extremely difficult to find the grip with our car, and yeah, very unpredictable as well, which causes us to do a lot of mistakes. So it's not that we're not trying, because with the team we've tried absolutely everything, but for some reason we haven't found our way yet.
Here, these are Leclerc's statements, and they are alarming because he doesn't just analyze the qualifying where they reshuffled the car, tried to find the right setup but failed. But he highlights how Leclerc, was a very strong driver in the junior categories in the wet. It was one of his strengths. Since he arrived at Ferrari, they've never been able to go fast in wet conditions. That is, they've always had problems in wet conditions. They've never managed to find the pace. And so it's an analysis that goes beyond the current situation, beyond the current qualifying, and analyzes the situation as a whole of his career at Ferrari. So it's kind of a soul-searching. He also went on to highlight how, first with Hamilton, then with Sainz, he had several teammates who had the same feelings. With Ferrari, they never managed to find the rhythm, especially in these conditions. And so Leclerc spoke in this case more as a man, as a driver, Leclerc, than as a Ferrari man, in my opinion. In the sense that he is somewhat distancing himself from the team at this moment with these statements. And be careful, because this is serious, meaning we might see a Leclerc who perhaps falls out of love with Ferrari. And this could be very worrying. Let's see the difference between Norris and Verstappen. So, first and second. Let's see together, because we saw, in the end, many fast laps in sequence. Norris managed to make the lap later than Verstappen. So he had the better track, if you will. Let's see here the difference between the two. Here we see that at the beginning, Lando did a great lap. He really did an outstanding first sector. Look here at the difference between the two. There's almost a 20-kilometer difference in braking. That is giving a 20-kilometer braking difference in braking to Max Verstappen is astonishing. So great Lando, because here he made a big difference. And we see that Norris went from a 1-second advantage to a 3/10 advantage, making a 7/10 error. Despite a 7/10 error, he remained in pole. I mean, I'm showing you the striking superiority of McLaren in this case. And great Lando anyway, because earning a 1-second advantage, hats off, he did it. Not Piastri, for example, with the same car, but still he has this cushion, this gap that he can manage well against the opponents, and this makes a big difference. If Max were driving a McLaren, we would be here talking about a championship that was closed a while ago. And I repeat this because here, Verstappen is really making a difference once again. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the car available to fight for the championship because his Red Bull is, in my opinion, in the same conditions. Let's go back to the telemetry as the Williams we saw today in wet conditions. That is, if we look at the time of Verstappen and Sainz in comparison today, look at the timing line, they are the same. I mean, the telemetry trace is exactly the same. There's Sainz's Williams, which even reaches a higher top speed compared to Verstappen's Red Bull. So the Williams is slightly less loaded, but look at the load level in the central part. That is, they are really very, very, very close. And this is proving that Verstappen was driving a car that in wet conditions here in Las Vegas, blah, 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 is at the same level as the Williams and managed to finish second behind Norris and remained. He got there right behind This is not to belittle Norris, but also to emphasize the strength of Verstappen, because Verstappen arrived at 0.3, just like Carlos Sainz, with a significantly inferior car, you see. So this is to make you understand how much Verstappen always makes the difference. He hasn't given up on the championship. On the contrary, Piastri seems to have given up more as he arrived 1 second behind Norris with the same car. And this is enough. Here's the breaking point. Look now. Counter steer, counter steer, counter steer. That is, he hadn't really managed the car on exit. We also saw it earlier in the telemetry, constantly losing the rear. Here, he really struggled a lot. Norris, despite this mistake, managed to get pole, so it's a big deal for him. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That's all from here at Lasso. See you in the next video.